evening. I'm Alan Jackson. Welcome to Nashville. Tonight we have with us one of the most respected voices in the country, the legendary Bill O'Reilly. If I read his list of accomplishments, it'll take up half the program. So let me tell you what we're going to do tonight. First, we're going to hear Bill's thoughts on the election, and then we're going to get the inside view of his new book, Confronting the President's No-Spin Assessments from Washington to Biden. Welcome to our show, Bill.
Thanks for having me in. I really appreciate it.
We are delighted to have you on. It's just been a week since Donald Trump shocked at least half the country with a red wave that pulled in voters of all races and stripes. On the air, I have heard you many times refer to the folks, and it seems that Mr. Trump found them and pulled them into the voting booths. What's your reaction to this big shift in America?
Well, it's got a lot of implications for the country going forward and for individual people. First of all, Joe Biden was a disaster, and I don't say that with any party favoritism or ideology. He's just a disaster. I had him as the second worst president in our history because he created problems. Bad presidents like Herbert Hoover, John Tyler, people like that, they inherited problems, and they couldn't fix them. Biden comes in, he opens the border. Why? Nobody knows. He never explained it. Okay, and then everybody suffers. And then he ignites inflation from 1.4 under Trump to more than 9% in 12 months through stupid policies. So once you have that, you're going to get people angry, and that's why the Democrats lost. It wasn't ideology, it was the working class men and women going, I'm getting pounded here by this Democratic machine led by Biden and Harris, and I want to change, and things are better 4 years ago, so I'm going to go with Trump. It's a simple equation, but that's exactly what happened.
Well, Bill, I know that you figured out years ago that the mainstream traditional media has stopped actually reporting, and they've started pushing an opinion agenda. Seems to be written to me to be written for liberals and Hollywood elites, leaves a big part of the country aside. Is their mission only to reach that selected few, or do they imagine the rest of us care about the opinion they're peddling?
Well, number one, the corporate media is finished in America. And this is the ultimate irony. The person they hate the most, Donald Trump, has destroyed them passively. It isn't anything that Trump did actively to hurt the corporate media. But the fact that he goaded them, and he did, into this very dishonest, horrible coverage of the campaign, of the election. Even the people who favor Kamala Harris, they know the fix is in. They know the corporate media isn't telling the truth, not reporting the truth. They know all that. And Americans viscerally don't want that. Why would you waste your time watching any presentation or reading any newspaper that is openly lying to you to try to advance an ideology? Why would anybody do that? Well, the answer is nobody will. So that you're seeing a cascade down of viewership and readership all over there. Now, tonight I report on my broadcast, the No Spin News, you get that out of BillO'Reilly.com and all over the country, that the Los Angeles Times circulation, second largest city in the country, dropped 73%, Alan. 73%. CNN is almost out of business. They're laying off people like crazy. They got pounded on election night. NBC News is in disarray, top to bottom, so is CBS and ABC. So Trump's sitting back there with the fake media, fake news, going, you know, I beat these people. And he did.
Well, I don't take any pleasure in seeing anyone suffer, but I have to admit it was interesting to watch places like CNN and The View backpedal after they got it so wrong. Days after Trump became president-elect, CNN was still peddling the idea that Trump was going to base his agenda on the Heritage 2025 report. And the host on The View were taking shots at Trump's appointment of the first female chief of staff. Is being anti-Trump a business, or is it just in their bloodstream?
Both. So the people who hire at the, and I worked for ABC and CBS as a correspondent back when it wasn't insane. I worked for Peter Jennings and then Dan Rather. I had a good experience with Jennings and a bad experience with Rather. But anyway, in the beginning, Donald Trump was gold for the television media, and so they pandered to him and they gave him all this exposure, and he beat Hillary Clinton. But then, when he became president, all the liberals and the corporations, and the media is dominated by the left, they basically said, no, we don't like him, we have to destroy him. And that has continued from 2016 to 2024. And yeah, all right, you don't like Donald Trump. People can understand that. He's bellicose. He's a New York swagger. A lot of people don't like that. But to trump up, pardon the pun, stuff about him, to ignore the good things that he's done, that's just flat out dishonest. So the question is it in their bloodstream? Yes. Ardent liberals are always going to be ardent liberals unless they have some kind of St. Paul moment on the road to Damascus, all right? They're always going to be there. That's where they live. That's the culture. That's their social life. On the economic front, none of them thought they were going to get pounded like this. And a lot of it is the rise of the new media, and I'm the leader of that. My operation at BillO'Reilly.com is the most successful independent news agency in the world. And when I left Fox News, I said, look, I'm never going to work for a corporation again, ever. I'm going to start my own corporation. And thank God, and I mean that literally, we've succeeded.
Well, you spent a lot of time with President-elect Trump. Tell us what you've seen, especially when the camera's not on. Most of us don't get the access that you've had.
Well, he's an interesting guy, no doubt about it. Good sense of humor. Loves to be the center of attention. He's never misled me. Before he was a politician, we used to go to Yankee and Met games and Knick games in New York, and I always got a lot of information from him. I wrote a book, Alan, called The United States of Trump, which if you're interested in the president, that's the book you want to read. And it's not a cupcake. It's basically, here he is. This is what he's about. This is how he got here. This is what his family is. United States of Trump. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller. And I looked at him as a very interesting guy. Totally different from me. I'm a working kid from Levittown. You know, he had advantages from his father in the real estate business. But he's a fascinating guy. I was never bored in his company. We always had very lively conversations.
You've written 19 of those #1 bestsellers, so we've got a whole list to read.
Yeah, we're really
In a
one of the
moment.
best-selling nonfiction authors in the world. I remember when I was a little kid and the nuns go, William, are you ever going to read a book? So now I got 20 million books that I've written in print, so it's crazy.
Send them to the nuns.
Yeah.
In a moment, Bill O'Reilly on his new book. He's a bestseller machine with over 30 books on Lincoln, JFK, Reagan, pinheads and patriots. The list goes on. The new one, I've got one here, Confronting the Presidents. We'll be right back with Bill O'Reilly in just a moment. Stay with us. You know, I've heard it said that Jesus wasn't involved in culture, that he was a theologian. Well, I'm quite certain the devil wants us to believe that. We have to take our faith outside the walls of the church and live it out in the world in which we find ourselves. I've written a new book, Jesus, His Followers, and Politics. It helps us take our biblical worldview into the culture and be difference makers. Folks, we can't hide in the churches and preach sermons. We've got to make an impact in this world with the good news of Jesus Christ. This book will give you a template, a roadmap for doing just that. I believe it'll be a blessing to you.
So many things that our culture calls political are actually biblical. Let's focus on following God, and He'll provide all we need to take His truth to the people around us. Request your copy of Pastor Allen's new book, Jesus, His Followers, and Politics, when you donate $25 or more today. Just go to alanjackson.com or call 800-880-5102.
Back now with the anchor of the No Spin News, Bill O'Reilly. It's time to hear about his new book, Confronting the Presidents. Bill, I've read your book, and I'd like to ask you to share some of the never-before-reported facts about our leaders, the ones that you found most interesting. You did a lot of digging to unearth important facts and a lot of interesting trivia, such as what they like to eat.
What I tried to do, Alan, was make them human. So we in America have a tendency to mythologize or demonize our leadership. And they're just regular guys, all 45 of them, in the sense that they are good and bad. We're all sinners. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and I wanted to get that across. I opened the book with George Washington, and this was the most startling thing that I uncovered. Washington and his mother didn't like each other. His mother wrote letters to the local Virginia papers saying, my son George is starving me to death, because General Washington at the time was fighting the Revolutionary War. He was in charge of making sure his mother had money, because George ran the estate where his mom lived, and his mom wanted more money, and Washington was distracted. And when she wrote the letters, it drove him nuts. Washington did not even go to his mother's funeral. So many Americans have family problems, and so did George Washington. So that was one thing that really surprised us, and we dug in. We got the original letters that Washington's mother wrote to the newspapers, and that's how we uncovered the story. Second one that really shook me was Lyndon Johnson. So I was alive when JFK was assassinated in 1963, and Johnson took over, and he did some good work in the civil rights area. But he was as corrupt as they come, this guy. And I had no idea how corrupt he was. I knew he blew the Vietnam War. That was, historically a botched effort that led to the deaths of more than 100,000 Americans, not only on the battlefield, but Agent Orange and afterward and all that other stuff. And Johnson knew that they were waging the war poorly, that America wasn't doing what they should have done to protect the forces. But the way he achieved power, LBJ, was horrible. And we detail Martin Guard in the Johnson chapter. He was a real villain. So that surprised me.
Well, having spent all the time sorting through history, which two or three of the presidents do you now have the most respect for?
Well, Abraham Lincoln, number one, far and away the best president, and a man of tremendous character. So Lincoln comes in and he follows the worst president of all time, James Buchanan from Pennsylvania, who was a coward. Buchanan did nothing to tamp down the growing rebellion in the South. And he looked the other way as rebels amassed arms and abused federal employees, even attacked people. And Buchanan didn't do anything. So when Lincoln came in from Illinois, the Civil War was a fait accompli. So he had to deal with the worst thing that's ever happened to this country, and more than 1 million deaths over the Civil War. In addition, his young son dies in the White House. You can imagine that. And his wife is kind of crazy, Mary Lincoln. In fact, after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, she had to be institutionalized, Mary Lincoln, for a while. And so he's dealing with all of this emotional stuff, at the same time waging this war, which he ultimately wins. And if you read his private correspondences, and that's the key to understanding all the presidents, he was a very kind, compassionate man, Abraham Lincoln, to everybody. He wasn't venal. He wasn't taken with his power. He wasn't strutting around. He was humble. I mean, he really, far and away, is the president I most admire. Then you have on the other side of the spectrum a very, very good president, Franklin Roosevelt, who I wouldn't want to have dinner with the guy. He was a snob, and he was, but efficient and brilliant, yeah. Helped a lot of people get out of the Depression, won World War II. One of my favorite presidents, though, is his cousin, FDR's cousin, Teddy Roosevelt. He lived 10 miles from where I am on Long Island right now in Sagamore Hill, and I go up there once in a while, get a little inspiration. So like Ronald Reagan, Teddy raised the morale of America. He was a no-spin guy. And he did a lot of good things, conservation. He was America First guy. People loved him. Not perfect, but really a guy that was larger than life. And I mean that, almost literally. So, he was FDR's cousin, and FDR was not like him, but FDR was a good president. And that's what I want to get across, that all 45 men had strengths and weaknesses. And then after you read the book, you'll be able to individually evaluate them. I don't do that for you. I just put out what we have learned.
With all that you've discovered in this research and now seeing this big shift in a national election, you think the country's turning back to a better track?
Well, for me, it's better because I don't like all this far left socialist woke stuff. But I know there are Americans who disagree, and they love that, and they're entitled to that opinion. But I think that the far left is really dangerous. I'm a supporter of self-reliance, number one, of capitalism, number two, because I came from very little and rose up because I was given talent by God, and I developed the talent. I worked hard, and you can do that in a capitalist system. You can't do it in a socialist system. I don't want to be a socialist. Kamala Harris, the furthest left candidate for president ever, wasn't even close. I guess that George McGovern would have been second, maybe Barack Obama third in that category, but Harris is so far out there on the left about what she believed. And again, I think the American people, it was a combination of we're not doing well under Biden-Harris, and we don't like this woke stuff. This is not, biological men competing with women in sports is not what we want. And so the combination led to the Trump victory.
Well, before we finish, what advice would you have for the folks, our folks who watch this show, about how to engage in shaping the country as we move into 2025?
Well, I'm a big proponent of getting involved locally. So, for example, school boards, if you want your schools to teach the kids responsibly, you get involved with the school board. If you want your town to run more efficiently, you get involved with the city council, the town council, the county, whatever it may be. That's how you can change things. A lot of people like to complain, like to whine, but the people who get in there, in the trenches, they're the change agents. And I think there are many, many traditional Americans than the leftists. I think the traditionals outnumber the leftists 3-1. And if the traditionals would mobilize, I think we get this country back on track fast.
Well, that's it. Wisdom from Bill O'Reilly. What a pleasure to have you on our show. Thank you.
All right, Alan, I'm coming down to Nashville. I want to meet you in person, okay?
I'll hold you to that. We'll go to the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, we'll go out to Hermitage and make fun of Andrew Jackson.
His new book is available everywhere, Confronting the Presidents. Support your local bookstore. Order it online. For those of you that want to send a message to Bill, you can write me an email at comments@alanjacksonnow.com. We'll be sure to forward them directly to him. We come back, I'll have some thoughts of my own. Things are looking up. Hi, TB and family. We live in uncertain times. That's why I want to share the importance of being financially prepared to help protect your retirement and your savings. Many Americans are turning to gold and silver to protect themselves. I want to strongly encourage you to contact Preserve Gold. They have a 5-star rating. They're experts in this important field. Preserve Gold is giving away a free wealth protection guide that explains it thoroughly. Please call or text them today. You'll be glad you did.
Call now 866-785-8995 for your free information kit to learn how you can put physical gold and silver into an IRA or 401k and how you can purchase precious metals for delivery direct to your home. Preserve Gold has hundreds of 5-star reviews and millions of dollars in trusted transactions. And you can get up to $15,000 in free gold and silver with a qualified purchase. Just call 866-785-8995 or text Jackson to 50505.
Sounded a note of hope in my heart, and I pray in yours, not predominantly because of the candidates were selected, but because of what was expressed by such a broad segment of the American people. Whether we call it flyover country or people who are irrelevant or some less flattering name, the general public in our nation stood up and said we have to have a change of direction. And I trust if we'll continue with that courage to continue to embrace that biblical worldview. It reminded me that we have a quiet fabric of a Judeo-Christian value set still resident in the hearts of the many of the American people. And if we will let that continue to guide us, I believe that we will have a better nation, a better future for our children and our grandchildren, for ourselves. With that in mind, I'm confident that we have more reasons for hope than we do for despair. When we return, I'm going to give you an update on the recent Jesus is Lord magnet giveaway and read some of your emails. Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts and opinions with us. Your emails make a big difference. A shout out to Amy and Ray from Southport, Maine. They requested one of our Jesus is Lord magnets, so now Jesus is Lord in Maine as well as Tennessee. More than 15,000 magnets have gone out so far. We're going to be representing all over the country. Jesus is Lord. Amy and Ray said, "Hello, Pastor. We watch your TV and show as often as we can. God is good." Absolutely, He is. Sheila from New York, "I'm pleasantly stunned at our election results. Those close around me are horrified and melting down, fearful of the media propaganda regarding Trump's direction. I want to address their outrageous fears, but it's difficult to get them to listen. Maybe we just start by listening to them and then having a simple prayer with them and put the nation in God's hands. That's a good beginning point for all of us. I think it's wise advice. If you haven't yet, take a moment to send your email to comments@alanjacksonnow.com. Your feedback and questions, they do a lot to shape our show. I'm Alan Jackson. You have a wonderful evening.